Well, let's talk about Canada. Remember the brave Canadian trucker convoy that stood up to government tyranny, said, no way are we getting a COVID shot simply for us to drive our trucks across the Canadian border. Well, the government arrested Canadian heroes, Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, tried to throw them behind bars, but of course they fought back. Canadians rose up and said, absolutely not. It's been a nightmare for them. Their sentencing, though, finally happened this week, and they learned their fates. They posted, though, this video right before the sentencing. They thought, hey, we might be going to prison. Watch.
Hi, everyone. It's Mary and Chris live from Ottawa.
Yes.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? We might be going to jail tomorrow, actually.
We're going to do it this way so we don't have to say, we're just waiting for a few people to come on here.
Yeah, that's right. You
Yes.
don't have to wait for a line.
We're here. We both did the 3,000 kilometer journey across, and we're here now, and we're waiting to hear our fate tomorrow morning in Ottawa court at 10 o'clock a.m.
So 10 o'clock tomorrow.
So we got their fate. The trucker convoy, of course, sparked outrage around the world with other farmers, truckers standing up to government tyranny, using really that Canadian trucker convoy model as their template for how to do it. I was in Berlin covering, farmers rolling into the square, demanding answers from their government on lowering taxes. I mean, it was really a catalyst moment in the Netherlands, all around the world. And now we've got that, plus the government there trying to cull 400 ostriches in the ostrich farm in British Columbia, terrorizing Katie Pasitny and her farm there. I mean, Canadians have had enough, and I think they're at a revolutionary moment right now, and you're seeing it in just the messages online. People saying we've had enough. What is going to happen to Canada? David Krayden is an independent journalist who writes at the Post Millennial, joins us from Ottawa, Canada today. Great to see you, David. What is first of all, before we get to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber and their sentencing, which you were covering, of course, I think you were at the courthouse covering that. Where do we stand right now with the ostrich farm? I know you spoke to Katie, the owner of that farm. Can you give us an update there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Clayton and Natalie. I just spoke to Katie a couple of hours ago. We stay in contact every day. And I was quite concerned because she said last night that she had been trying to determine what is in the dumpsters. And she told me today that there are substantially fewer ostriches. She has no way of finding out what that actually means. But from the sources she's been talking to, they're saying there's possibly 30 to 40 fewer ostriches. I've heard her use that number in the past. So what is going on here? Because they can't feed their ostriches, they can't even see them. But here's really breaking news, and Katie will be on tomorrow with me to talk about this in more depth. But she told me today she talked to the RCMP liaison team, the police liaison team, and one RCMP officer came to her and said, look, here's what I'm prepared to do. We'll send a drone up over the farm. We'll get video footage of the ostriches. I'll take the video footage back. I'll assess it. I'll analyze it. And I'll tell you exactly how many ostriches are left on your farm. I can't give you the video, but you can trust me. I'll give you an accurate number. Katie said, sounds great. Thank you, sir. Go forth and do it. Within probably hours, the CFIA was on the phone to his superior saying, butt out, get out of our investigation. You're not putting a drone above that farm. And if you do, something's going to happen to that RCMP officer. I don't think they made any physical threats, but they suggested that this was not a good thing. And that RCMP officer is now under a cloud because of this. Now, Clayton, I ask you this. What kind of a country do you have where a bunch of faceless murdering bureaucrats in the CFIA have authority over your national police force? And this is exactly what is happening here. They are calling the shots. They are saying the RCMP can't even send a drone up over this airspace and record video. Canada is off the rails, Clayton. When you say there's a spirit of revolution and rebellion in this country, God knows why. Because we have been putting up with this government authoritarianism for so long. And this farm, this oppressed farm, with this family that is simply trying to do an honest day's work and is being told by the government, you no longer have access to your private property, your livestock, or your livelihood. The government has occupied this farm and told them they have no rights. And the CFIA, an organization that Katie refers to as the Canadian Animal Cruelty Agency, now seems to be an out of control, off the rails bureaucracy that seems to do whatever the hell it pleases, seems to be able to break the law with impunity, and it's getting away with it. So what Katie wants to do is to formally charge the CFIA with animal cruelty. And she's been in touch with former police officers who have quoted aspects and sections of the Criminal Code of Canada that are distinctly applicable to this kind of charge. So I think this is where she needs to go with this, because the CFIA will do whatever the hell it pleases, whatever it thinks it wants to do to advance its agenda. There was a report out this week that the Supreme Court decision on whether to hear this appeal could last for 3 months. Katie said to me today, I don't believe that for a minute. This is all about discouraging our supporters from staying on the farm, discouraging friendly media from reporting on this, from coming to the farm. I don't believe it's going to be 3 months. But I'll tell you this, Clayton, if the CFIA continues its animal abuse, its neglect of these creatures, its direct application of oppressive tactics, these animals are going to continue to die. And that's exactly what the CFIA wants. It wants to pretend they're dying of some pre-existing condition, whatever that means, because they're not even saying the pre-existing condition was H1N1 avian flu. It was just some mysterious pre-existing condition. This agency must be held accountable for its ravenous actions against these animals and these farmers and this farm. And I can tell you, increasingly, with every day that passes, Clayton, more and more Canadians are saying, enough, we're fed up with a government that has no respect for its people, no respect for private property, and is waging a war on agriculture and farmers in this country. And more than just this is just the prime example of how much this government hates farmers and how much it hates private property and how much it disrespects its population. We're living in Stalinist Russia right now. That's how I would describe Canada.
But it seems like the government is going to carry out the task, even though they're being watched, and then say, oh, we're sorry later. Like they're committed to it. And is there case law that would support? Because in the United States, you can't really sue the U.S. government without their permission in most cases. Is there a way for her to do that? Because otherwise everybody would sue. Like, I paid my taxes and I didn't get the right. And so can she do that? Or clearly she's going to, if you go to Save Our Ostriches, I think it is, saveourostriches.com. I mean, they need a lot of financial support because they're being terrorized.
Well, Katie has the goods on the CFIA. She has video footage that shows the CFIA not delivering electrolytes to the ostrich that died. This ostrich died from neglect. This ostrich died because the CFIA was given custody of these animals by the Supreme Court of Canada. What does custody mean? Well, if you're given custody of your children, you're expected to feed them and look after them. And that's what custody means in this case. And the Criminal Code of Canada does provide a very specific passage about people or organizations that commit cruelty to animals or allow cruelty to animals to persist. They can be charged under the Criminal Code of Canada, and they can receive up to 5 years in prison and up to $10,000 fine, or both. And it's funny because this is a farm that's asked, let us test these animals, please. If you don't want to do it, CFIA, if you don't want to do it, Mark Carney, we will test these animals. They have said, you do that, you get 6 months in jail and up to $200,000 fine. That's their threat. So something stinks about this from day one. Obviously, the CFIA knows these animals are healthy. There's no health danger here. It took them 3 days to don their silly hazmat costumes because they clearly knew there was no health threat here. They were walking around without even masks on their face. claiming these birds posed a public health threat. This is a charade. It's a joke. But this is, as you've said so often, Clayton, it's a criminal organization called the CFIA. But as Katie more accurately describes it, this is the Cruelty to Animals Agency.
Yeah, absolutely. They are a criminal organization. Is that Philip?
Yeah. So I just want to point out one of the early articles I read on this. The CFIA, like a spokesman for them, like flat out said, and I'm paraphrasing, but they don't care if the birds are sick. That's not the point. That's what they're arguing. But it's just that they didn't follow orders. They were told to do this and they didn't do it. And so it was just because I told you so. It has nothing to do with them being sick. I mean, that was one of the earlier articles I read on this.
And that's precisely it, Philip. They're following the directives of the World Animal Health Organization and the World Health Organization, the United Nations. They're not following Canadian law. They're not even obeying the Canadian government. They're obeying these globalist, internationalist entities. They're following UN law, which is a stamp out policy, even if the birds are no longer sick. Well, we should have stamped them out 72 hours after the sickness erupted, but that doesn't matter. Even though it's been 8-9 months later, we're still going to stamp them out because the UN tells us to do that. That's one of the incredible anomalies of this situation, one of the incredible injustices of this situation, because these people aren't even following Canadian law. They're following UN dictates.
Before we get you out of here, David, let's do an update here on Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. They were sentenced this week. I think they published that video thinking, man, we're probably going to go to jail. We don't know what's going to happen here. This has been a nightmare for them. Of course, the trucker convoy, they became really national heroes, I think, national symbols of freedom and what it means to stand up for liberty in your country. What is their fate? What will they have to deal with now for the next 18 months?
Well, Chris Barber and Tamara Lich both received 12 months house arrest. Chris will also have a 6-month curfew. Tamara, a 3.5-month curfew. She got sort of time off for the time she's already served in prison, 74 days in custody. So the judge said, we'll give you some time off your curfew for that. Very emotional day, Clayton. A packed courthouse, standing room only, except of course there was no place for standing room. If you didn't have a seat, you weren't invited. 25% of the audience was media, independent and mainstream. 75% were supporters of Chris and Tamara. Very emotional day. I have been there since day one, and it's been 2 years and 1 month to the day that this trial began. I was there for probably 95% of these hearings. And a very emotional day. When the judge read the sentencing for Chris, she called a break. And we all knew, of course, that Tamara would probably get about the same thing, or maybe even less. The judge left to go to her chambers. Everybody stayed seated, very, very quiet. As soon as the judge left the room, everybody in that room, except some of the media, stood up and applauded and looked over at Chris, who was very, very emotional about this. And a lot of people have been saying, it's a grievous sentence. He shouldn't have got anything. It should have been an absolute discharge. Of course it should have been. Should this charge have ever been levied? No. Should this trial have ever occurred? Absolutely not. Should they have been found guilty? Absolutely not again. But I'm telling you this, Clayton and Natalie, if it hadn't been for organizations like yours, for media outlets like yours, and I'll take a lot of credit myself, I wrote about 40 stories about this. I don't know how many broadcasts I did on my own station and other people's channels to talk about this. This could have been worse, because we cannot trust this government, this liberal government, not to interfere in the judicial process. We cannot trust this liberal government, this Marxist Carney government, to do the right thing, or for that matter, the provincial government of Doug Ford in Ontario, which actually was the one responsible for these charges. This was a provincial court. This is a provincial offense that they were charged under. So I'm standing up today and I'm saying, thank God there were enough honest, credible journalists out there who covered this story in a way that said, this is a political show trial, and it's been that way from day one. They put these two people on trial because they simply disagreed with the COVID narrative. And we know now that Pfizer and Moderna knew about the danger of this vaccine. Naomi Wolf has edited the Pfizer papers. I talked to Naomi on my own show recently. This is conclusive. They knew the dangers here. So my question, when one reporter asked Tamara Leach's lawyer, Lawrence Greenspan, is Tamara remorseful? And he said, absolutely not. She pled not guilty. And she told me, I'm not going to express remorse. And I said to Lawrence, I had the next question. I said, Lawrence, did Tamara save lives? And he looked at me right in the eye and he said, yeah, she probably did. She probably did. Obviously, he can't pull out a number from his magic bag. But he said, I'll tell you this. Her actions, her protests touched the lives of tens, hundreds of thousands of people. And I wrote the next day, Chris and Tamara probably saved hundreds of thousands of lives, because even though the Emergencies Act brought the full force of the state and the police down on their heads, after the Freedom Convoy protest, the laws, the mandates, the lockdowns began to recede in Canada. And a person contacted me today in response to an article I wrote entitled, Did Chris and Tamara Save Lives? She said, they saved my life. I was going to commit suicide until the mandates and the lockdowns receded. So I don't know how many lives they saved. How many people said, I'm not going to get the jab now, I don't have to? Because I've lost 2 family members because of the COVID jab. And I tell you, a lot of other people I know have too. But I think a lot of lives were saved because of the protests and the courage and the determination and the pushback from Chris Barber and Tamara Leach. I'm proud to call them my friends after 2 years of going to this trial, and I will continue to correspond with them and to support whatever they do, because these are great Canadians. These are icons of Canadian heroism. And as you said, Clayton, they defined the anti-vax, the anti-COVID mandate protest, and they've defined how grassroots people, truckers, blue-collar workers, ordinary Canadians, and ordinary people around the world can rise up and tell their government to shove it. We are pushing back, we're fighting back, and we won't take it anymore.
David Krayden, well said. I don't need to say anything else. I don't need to jump in with my 2 cents. Well said, my friend. Yeah, and we're excited. We'd love to get to Tamara on the show. I wanted all of this to sort of die down where she could come here on Redacted, and Chris as well, and be able to tell their story when they're finally away from the media circus for a little while. David, great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much as always.
Thank you both, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, David.